Alright, Joe. What's up? I just want to say something about what's going on with this presidential election and the way they're attacking Bernie Sanders and even Tulsi Gabbard. You know, Bernie Sanders says he's a socialist Democrat, which is not a bad thing since half of this country, half of the system is socialist anyway. We live in a half capitalist, half socialist, half free market country. You know what I'm saying? But there's been like these scare tactics that started with Hillary and Donald Trump, and it's continuing with not just cable news but mainstream media like The View, Whoopi Goldberg, and her co-hosts. You know, they're all saying, Bernie Sanders is gonna destroy the country, as if the country is doing good right now. You know what I'm saying? Like, America has never been a good country. I mean, it's been worse back then, but it's still not perfect now. You know what I'm saying? And we don't have the freedom because whenever we speak out against war, that's when they start attacking us, calling us anti-American and shit like that. Now remember, if you go back to the 1960s, if you go back then, just remember how they attacked Martin Luther King Jr. when he spoke out against the Vietnam War and the invasion of Cuba. Martin Luther King Jr. has been speaking out against war probably since 1963. Okay, if you listen to all his speeches, now nobody ever listened to his speeches. Candace Owens doesn't listen to his speeches. The women in The View don't listen to his speeches. The cable news networks obviously don't study all his speeches. King was always against war. Even when he was speaking out against segregation, even when he was denouncing the violence in our own community, he still took time to fight against institutional racism, economic segregation, physical segregation, and the Vietnam War. You can do all that. You know what I'm saying? So all that shit that Bill O'Reilly was doing when he said, these people want to talk bad about the government, but yeah, look at your own communities. Well, Martin Luther King Jr. spoke out against violence in general. You can do both. But when he spoke out against the Vietnam War and talked about redistribution of the wealth that was going to the defense department and going to the war and going to ammunition building and saying putting it to end programs to end poverty, he was called a socialist. He was called a communist. He was called anti-American. He was called a radical by the mainstream media, by the newspapers, by the politicians, by like Ronald Reagan, like Donald Rumsfeld, who was a senator at that time. They were all saying that he was either being led by communists or he was a communist. Ronald Reagan basically called him a communist. And he called the whole civil rights movement a communist movement. You know, I don't hear Candace Owens bringing that up as articulate as she may come across. She's not that bright. Now, and I don't see nobody in The View bringing it up. Now, the women in The View are doing the exact same thing that J. Edgar Hoover and Joseph McCarthy and all these people in the media were doing to attack anybody that questions our foreign policy. Our foreign policy is an imperialistic, racist foreign policy. So, if maybe you disagree. Obviously, the women in The View and even other people in the media, alternative media, actually supported the war in Syria and Libya. You know, and that's a big mistake. The mainstream media supported the war in Iraq. That was a mistake, obviously. They fired this guy that was doing television talk. How you say it? TV talk radio show for a long time. Phil Donahue, that was his name. So they got rid of Phil Donahue because he was speaking out against the fact that we were going to invade Iraq, which is fascism. That's neo-fascism. So everybody was saying, no, the war in Iraq is justified. Hillary supported it. Joe Biden, the Republicans, Democrats, they all supported the war, the invasion of Iraq, except for a few. Cynthia McKinley, Bernie Sanders, Jill Stein, who, by the way, is also being labeled anti-American socialist. So getting back to what I was trying to say, so Bernie Sanders, Tulsi Gabbard, who's also running for president, and Jill Stein have all been labeled socialist, communist, anti-American, radical, you know, anti-American, you know, because they're against American. If you speak out against American foreign policy and you're speaking out against the institutions, then you're labeled anti-American. And that's what they did with Martin Luther King. So the women in the View, like Whoopi Goldberg and John McCain's daughter, they're all doing the exact same thing. You know, and I don't think they care. Or maybe they forgot what the media did to Martin Luther King Jr. You know what I'm saying? But I had to speak out on this because it's been bothering the fuck out of me, you know what I'm saying? But it's just wrong. It's just wrong. And why, you know, I question why Elizabeth Warren didn't drop out before the Super Tuesday, and I believe it was, my opinion, believed to make Bernie Sanders lose, you know, because some of the people who voted for Elizabeth Warren were probably on the fence about Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders, and they went with her. So she took some votes away from Bernie Sanders, you know what I'm saying? And me personally, I'm not a registered Democrat. I could give a fuck about both parties. You know, I'm an independent. Now, I'm a born-again independent. I used to be a Democrat. You know what I'm saying? And, you know, obviously the establishment wants Joe Biden to win, but Joe Biden's not going to beat Trump. Trump is going to, if Joe Biden wins the whole thing, Trump will be president for the next 4 years again. And let me tell you, I hear Trump and Joe Biden are the same. Like, they're both were against busing black children. No, Donald Trump's father was a no racist. You know what I'm saying? Like, they were all against busing black children. You know what I'm saying? Like, busing black kids to white schools. And they both like to talk tough and shit like that. So and they're both doing dirty business in the Ukraine and probably Russia. You know, Hillary Clinton was in Russia too, making paid speeches. So I don't see the difference with any of them. You know what I'm saying? I really don't. And Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton were sued by the African American community in, I believe, Little Rock, Arkansas, back in the early 70s, around the time that the Trumps were sued by the black community here in New York City, by the civil rights community. You know what I'm saying? Like, but nobody wants to bring that up, or they'll say, oh, well, the Clintons deserve to be sued, but not Trump, or vice versa. Nah, they all deserve to be sued because they were all doing racist shit back then. You know what I'm saying? And Joe Biden saying that we had to work with segregationists. No, you didn't. You didn't have to work with those motherfuckers. You know what I'm saying? Because they didn't give a fuck about us. You didn't fuck about African Americans or Puerto Ricans. So, you know what I'm saying? Nah. So, I think it's a big mistake that the voters made in those states in Texas and Alabama. But I'm not surprised, you know what I'm saying? Because, you know, those states, were inherently racist for a long time. So I'm not surprised that they would go for a center-right person like Joe Biden. You know what I'm saying? Like, and yeah. So I don't think Joe Biden is going to beat Trump, and I think it's a big mistake. But going back to what I was saying again, when you call Bernie Sanders anti-American, socialist, communist, radical, those are the same language that the media and J. Edgar Hoover and the FBI were using against Martin Luther King Jr. and Andrew Young and others, but specifically Martin Luther King Jr. Because Martin Luther King Jr. believed that the wealth should be redistributed from the military and the defense budget to programs that get people off poverty and get people better jobs and better wages. I mean, he spoke about that. You know what I'm saying? And so, yeah, Whoopi Goldberg is fronting. She's crazy. The women in the View are crazy. And Candace Owens is crazy. And I don't want to give her too much fame because I think her fame is over. But Candace Owens is doing the same thing, and she doesn't realize that she's using the same language that they use on Martin Luther King Jr. when you call somebody radical and anti-American. And obviously Bernie Sanders is not a racist, so I don't know where that came from. And I've heard other people say that. You know what I'm saying? But I think that it's a big mistake to allow this to happen. Somebody should speak out on it. I don't know why The View don't have Bernie Sanders on the show to let him defend himself. At least they did have Tulsi Gabbard, and Tulsi Gabbard defended herself, perfectly. You know what I'm saying? Like, she took it to Joyce, and I don't believe none of the mainstream media, and this is bullshit. But Joe Biden is not gonna, and I think he has dementia. Dude is not pronouncing certain words the right way. He's forgetting things. Like, I guess they don't care. I guess they figure, well, if Joe Biden becomes president and he does have dementia, then they could remove him and put the vice president, whoever the vice president is. I think that's a stupid thing. You know what I'm saying? And I think the majority of people, and there's still a lot of people who don't vote, and I don't blame them. And most of those people will probably vote for Bernie Sanders. You know what I'm saying? The mainstream media don't realize that most of us actually agree with most of Bernie Sanders' policies and all of Tulsi Gabbard's policies and Jill Stein's policies. Now I agree with Jill Stein, believing in full-blown socialism, but I do believe in certain forms of socialism. We have socialism. We have hospitals, schools. Those are all forms of socialism. Schools are free. Regular school, high schools, junior high schools, those are free. That's socialism. The fact that we only pay a little bit for police protection, that's socialism. Hospitals is a form of socialism. So what the fuck is wrong with socialism? And Venezuela is not a full-blown socialist country. It's half capitalist, half free market. That's why you have, super condos being built on the waterfront, just like you do here in New York City and San Diego. You know what I'm saying? It's not if Venezuela was a socialist country, you wouldn't have condos being built in Venezuela. Trust me. You know what I'm saying? They're stupid, for saying that. They're dumb. And Maduro is not a dictator. He was elected by the people. So how is he a dictator? You know what I'm saying? How was Hugo Chavez a dictator? He left office. So I don't understand. You know what I'm saying? But to go back to what I was saying one more time, when you call Bernie Sanders a socialist, anti-American radical, you're doing exactly what the media called Martin Luther King Jr., what they were calling him. You know what I'm saying? They were calling Martin Luther King Jr. a radical, socialist, anti-American, a troublemaker. Just remember that when you speak in front of the camera. You know what I'm saying? Whoopi Goldberg, you should know better. You know better. Maybe you're living comfortable now. You don't got to go through what everyone else go through, but you should know better than to use the same language that J. Edgar Hoover and the FBI used against Martin Luther King Jr. But anyway, that's all I got to say. You know what I'm saying? I had to get that off my chest. You know what I'm saying? But, yeah, so that's all I got to say. Peace. You know what I mean? Later.